The 2025 New York Giants draft is in the books, and I'm going to break it all down for you coming up next on a special edition of the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And I especially want to send a shout out to my Blue Crew community members who were with me in the chat room that we had, our Discord channel chat room all weekend long. I had a great time. I wish I could have been there a little bit more often, but, duty calls. But when I was in there, it was great chatting with all of you. And we're going to do it again when we have the rookie minicamp in a couple of weeks. So thanks again for your support. All right, Giant fans, on today's show, the Giants 2025 draft class is in the books. We're going to break it all down for you. We're going to start off with a general overview of kind of how we got to this point, what the strategy was for the Giants, why they took this strategy. Then we're going to look at day 1 and day 2 picks in segment 2, and then in segment 3, we'll talk about the day 3 picks and some final thoughts about the Giants 2025 draft class. So again, welcome on into everybody. Let's get into it because we got a lot to talk about here. All right. Now, at the end of last year, John Mara, who really doesn't talk to the media a whole lot these days, came out and he spoke to the media about why he decided to retain Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And in retrospect, what John Mara said kind of laid the blueprint for the franchise and the roster building process moving forward. He talked about the need to find a franchise quarterback. He talked about improving the trenches, both offensive line and defensive line. He talked about, building up the defense because he got tired of seeing opposing offenses march down the field almost effortlessly against the defense. So right then and there, you kind of knew, although you didn't really need him to tell you. If you had 2 functioning eyes, you can kind of, see what was going on. Right then and there, you kind of knew what Joe Schoen was going to do in his approach to building up the roster. So that brought us into free agency. And just real quick, what the Giants did in free agency is they used the veteran approach to fill some of the most glaring holes on the roster. Now, the reason why I mention this, and it's not any surprise, but this is important because if you go back to when Joe Schoen was initially hired, he spoke about his plan to build up the Giants roster. He said, my plan, and I'm paraphrasing here, but my plan is draft, develop, and retain. Folks, the Giants really haven't done a good job of that. If you think about it, since Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll came into the Giants organization, they haven't really done a good job of that. Part of that was because they inherited players from the previous regimes, okay, both GM and coaching. So they had to kind of weed out guys that, maybe didn't fit their vision going forward, replace them with their own guys. But the problem is they had to kind of do that on the fly. So they didn't really have that draft, develop, retain rhythm in place until really last year, 2024, when they hit that draft class out of the park. So what the Giants have done for 2025 and their draft is they plugged in some veterans in some of the, the key spots because, hey, they also have to start winning games. That's obvious. And they came up with another strong draft, at least on paper. Obviously it remains to be seen if this class is going to be as good as last year's class or maybe even better. But they drafted their guys who, many of whom, it would be nice if they could start, but they don't have to start. Not all of them. All right. Some of them probably will. Some of them probably won't. Some of them may not even make the roster. And we'll talk about all that, obviously, as we go through the show. But the Giants are in a better situation. All right. You throw out that first year where they kind of surprised everybody and they, went to the playoffs and, that kind of skewed Joe Schoen's assessment of the roster, which was a mistake in retrospect. Now they're getting back on track with how they're building up this team. And you would like to think that if all things fall into place, this team is going to start to win more games, maybe even qualify for a wild card spot. That might be a little aggressive. I get it, but it would be nice if they, at least knock on the door. I mean, obviously they're not ready for a Super Bowl, to contend for the Super Bowl. But if we can get them at least right on the right path to where they're not getting blown out every week, to where they're not looking like, they don't belong on the same field as their opponent, that's a step in the right direction. And, we talk about what the Giants have to show in order for Dable and Shane to retain their jobs. They have to show progress. They have to be better by week 18 than they were in week 1. So getting back to the draft, this year's draft, basically they have set it up to fulfill what Joe Schoen said he wanted to do when building up the roster, which is draft, develop, and retain. And again, looking back over the years, they've drafted, yes, because the draft is every year. But can we honestly say they fully developed guys other than maybe Dexter Lawrence, other than maybe Andrew Thomas, and maybe, a few other guys? No, I don't think we could say that, at least until, last year's class came in. Have they retained a lot of guys that have come through the doors? No. Okay. With the exception of, again, Dexter Lawrence, with the exception of Andrew Thomas and Darius Slayton, 3 guys who, by the way, were drafted by the previous GM. So now you want to see the Giants move forward. All right. Those 3 guys that I just mentioned, they are the last remaining guys from the previous regime. This is Joe Schoen's team and Brian Dable's team. So now it is time for these guys that they are bringing in to start blending together and taking this franchise upward. So the overview or the objective of this draft was to add additional talent. Some of them, again, will be starters. Some of them will probably sit and develop. Some of them may end up on the practice squad. But there's no rush here because, again, they brought in veterans to basically serve as a temporary bandage, if you will, while these younger guys develop and until these younger guys are ready. And who knows, maybe by, later in the season, the last quarter of the 2025 season, we'll start to see some of these guys who maybe start the year off in sporadic roles or whatnot. But overall, I think the strategy makes sense. Now, will it, translate into wins and success? That remains to be seen. But overall, the draft class, as I will get into, in the next couple of segments, on paper, I would give this class an A+. I like what Shane did. I like, the thinking behind the roster building. And I'm very interested to see what it means moving forward and how these guys do. Okay, coming up next, we're going to break down day 1 and day 2. The Giants had 3 picks in the first 2 days. So we will break that down for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5 o'clock. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hiring hashtag frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder why 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. So go on, post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up on Locked On Giants, we're still 5 days a week, and we're going to be 5 days a week for the next month or so. I'm already started to I've already started to reach out to my Locked On College hosts, to the coaches at the schools of the draft picks, to other industry insiders, just to get them to come on, talk about the Giants' various draft picks. So as I, book them, I'll let you know who's coming on when. But the goal is to bring in some of the people who know these draft picks the best. And also, just a quick note, the Giants rookie mini camp is going to be not next weekend, but the weekend after that. It's not going to be, a full like team or 7-on-7 or anything like that. It's going to be basically drills, but it will be a chance to see some of not some of them, all of them participate. And I, of course, will be there for both days, and I will have special reports for you, as well as for my Blue Crew community members in our Discord channel. By the way, if you want information on joining the Blue Crew community, you can find that in the show notes. So that's what's coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, let's get into the first, second, and third rounds of the draft, what the Giants did. All right, round one, edge rusher Abdul Carter taken third overall. Now, no brainer there, folks. If you've been listening to me, if you've been reading me over on New York Giants on this side, I've been consistent with saying it was going to be Abdul Carter. I know some people were like, well, will it be a quarterback? Will it be, Travis Hunter if he falls? I didn't think Travis Hunter was going to fall. I figured he was going to go second to Cleveland. Cleveland, traded down, obviously. Jacksonville moved into that spot. They got Travis Hunter. Abdul Carter was the right pick for the New York Giants. Now, some of you will say, well, now they have too many, pass rushers. No such thing, folks. If anything, Abdul Carter gives the Giants defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, he gives him almost like a level up on the defense. He unlocks an entirely new level of things he can do, whether it's the amoeba defense, whether it's, moving Carter on the pass rushing downs, making him be one of the inside linebackers instead of Micah McFadden, having Carter drop back into coverage, whatever the case may be. They can get more pass rushers on the field. And I really believe that one of the reasons why the Giants put such a heavy emphasis on their front seven, in addition to the fact that they were getting pushed around like, rag dolls out there, is that it will also help the back end of the defense, which also struggled last year. All right. You still have a relatively young veteran group back there, which should be a little bit better. They have a new position coach in Marcon Manuel for quarterbacks and safeties. But, it helps when you have a good pass rush who can force the quarterback to throw earlier or to force him to throw off balance. And that's what Abdul Carter can do. This guy has speed. He's got length. He can bend. He's going to be a pass rushing terror. Now, you guys probably also saw that Carter asked about wearing number 56, which, for anybody who follows the Giants, nobody touches 56. That number is sacred. All right. So he's not going to get 56. Lawrence Taylor did not give his blessing. And he did it, look, he approached it in a nice way. He basically told Carter in a meeting that he had, I think, on Saturday before the draft, before day 3 of the draft started, basically said to them, look, you go and you pick your own number and you build your own legacy. And I thought that was a good way of handling it. And, Carter, to his, look, he had nothing to lose by asking. But I thought that was a good way for LT to handle it. But I really like the Carter pick. I give that pick an A+. It was the right pick to make. And I have absolutely no problems with that pick. I think Carter will be a starter. And if nothing else, Carter can also help take some of the onus off of Kayvon Thibodeau, whose fifth-year option was picked up, by the way, and Brian Burns. All right, those guys played a lot last year when they were healthy and on the field. And they wore down. I mean, I'm still sitting here wondering to this day how Brian Burns got through the season, knowing the types of injuries he had and knowing how bad he was hurting. But he gutted it out. He took pride in his Spider-Man persona, if you will. And I think having, Abdul Carter in the building, that's going to help take some of the onus off of those guys, give them a chance to have a breather while also developing Carter in whatever areas he's still lacking in giving him a chance to play. So that's another strategy that I think will happen. So I really like that pick of Abdul Carter. Now, the surprise pick, and no, it wasn't really a surprise because I said it was a possibility. I just didn't know if the Giants would do it, is when the Giants traded back up into the bottom of the first round to get quarterback Jackson Dart. Now, it came out the last week and a half that Brian Dable was very, very interested in working with Jackson Dart. He had gotten, Dable, this is, had gotten good feedback from Nick Saban, who faced Jackson Dart down in that SEC division before Saban retired. And he also spoke about how, Jackson Dart ran systems that were similar to what, Dable was used to coaching or calls for. So the question is, would they be able to get him? And to get him, you figure, okay, they probably had a second round grade on him. So by trading away their second round pick to move back into the bottom of the first round, not a big deal. They also gave up one of their third round picks, which I kind of figured they would. Now, the deal breaker for the Giants, from what I have heard, would have been had the Texans said, we want pick number 65 instead of pick number 99. That would have been a deal breaker. That meant the Giants would not have moved up. They would have taken their chances and stayed put for Jackson Dart or a quarterback of their choosing in the second round. But the Texans were willing to play ball. The Giants were able to make it happen. And I think they also threw in an extra pick next year. I want to say it was a third, was it, for next year? So really not a huge price to pay if you think about it, if Jackson Dart develops into the next franchise quarterback. And I know a lot of people were gung-ho. They were like, you've got to get a quarterback in the first round and you got to get them high and early because you never know if you're going to be in this spot again. Folks, here's the thing. If for some reason Jackson Dart doesn't develop, and right now nobody has any reason to think he won't, the Giants can always try again next year when the quarterback class is going to be a little deeper. They could always maybe flip the pick for a trade. All right. There's always going to be teams looking for a trade. Then the Patriots just trade Joe Milton, who they drafted, a year ago? It happens. So, thinking positively, Jackson Dart develops into their future franchise quarterback. If he doesn't, you move on from him and you keep taking a swing. But this was the swing that Joe Schoen needed to make, that he spoke about at the combine, about wanting to take a swing at a quarterback, which he has done. So we'll see how it plans out. The plan for Jackson Dart is he's going to sit this year. All right, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson will actually be the starter, Jameis Winston the backup. Those two are going to carry the load. The exact same plan that the Giants had in place for last year had they been able to draft the quarterback that they wanted. All right, so here's the other thing, the other takeaway with Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart, kind of like Bo Nix of Denver, can sling the ball down the field. And I don't know, if the Giants look back at last year and have regrets that they didn't take Bo Nix or Michael Penix or J.J. McCarthy. But this time, they weren't going to get so fussy that, if we don't get Cam Ward, that's it. We're not going to take a quarterback. They had to take a quarterback. They did. Onward and upward. We'll see how Jackson Dart develops. The spring, the summer, all going to be very important. He's going to get an opportunity to develop. Now, once we get to the season, we won't get to see him, obviously, because the practices are closed, but we'll have ways of keeping track and keeping tabs on how he's coming along. We might see him in a few games, maybe in a mop-up role. Who knows? But the arrival of Jackson Dart, huge for the New York Giants. We'll see if he can turn that into, a success story. All right. Now, day number 2, Giants had one draft pick. They went with probably one of my favorite picks in the draft. There's several favorite picks of mine in this draft. They went with defensive lineman Darius Alexander. Position flexibility, check. Can he play 3 tech? Check. Is he does he have some pass rushing moves? Check. How is he against the run? Pretty good? Check. Checks a lot of boxes. Okay. Little raw, still needs his technique fine-tuned, as will most rookies. But in terms of what Darius Alexander can bring to the Giants, he can play the nose if he needs to. All right. How many times did we see in the past, whenever Dexter Lawrence came off the field, teams went right to that spot and they did so with success? Well, now that the Giants have Darius Alexander, that should stop, you would think, right? The kid's going to be a good one. Dexter Lawrence hasn't had a running mate since Leonard Williams. I think in Darius Alexander, he's now got a running mate. Going to take some time for Alexander to really develop, get comfortable, get used to, the pro level, but he's a fast learner. Really, really good pickup. I think that's probably one of my my choice for underrated draft picks of this Giants draft class, right? And if you, again, the Giants put a lot of resources in that defensive line. Chauncey Golston back in free agency, Jeremiah Ledbetter, Roy Robertson Harris, lots of resources. That defensive front should be one of the better ones, if not the best in football, if it all comes together. So Darius Alexander, their third round pick, 65 overall, really good value. He was probably, I think he was projected to go late first, early second. And, the fact that he fell the way he did, great value for the Giants, and I'm just glad they got him. All right, coming up next, Giant fans, we're going to talk about day three's picks. We've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 picks from day three. We'll talk about those right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, new customers can bet $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. The draft is over. We're talking about the draft class. This is an impressive looking draft class. I would give it an A plus this whole class. I really like what Joe Schoen did here. So let's talk now about the day three selections. And we're going to kick it off with, I think, the pick that I just absolutely love. I love this pick. I think this guy is going to be one of my favorites. Just based on the enthusiasm. Kind of reminds me, and I haven't met him yet, obviously, but just from what I've seen on social media, almost reminds me a little bit of Phil McConkey back in the day. Very, enthusiastic, very, up and positive. And that's running back Cam Scatterbo, a guy that I really, really was hoping the Giants would get. Now, look, the Giants right now at running back, Tyrone Tracy is the starter. Devin Singletary is obviously the backup, or the second guy, if you will, in the committee. Scatterbo eventually is going to take that second spot. The Giants now have a big, thunderous type of runner, which they have not had in quite some time. I don't want to quite put Scatterbo in the same category as a Brandon Jacobs, but he's along that line. So Scatterbo, good out of the backfield as a receiver. He's good between the tackles. Great with picking up yards after the catch. There's just so much to like about him. He plays special teams. He's tough, maybe a little too tough for his own good. Hopefully he doesn't wear down or get injured. But this is a pick I absolutely love. It's a value pick, great value. Now, obviously, the big question mark with running back, any rookie running back, how do they do in pass pro? So that's something we obviously need to see. But again, the Giants are set up to where maybe he doesn't have to do that right away until they can trust him to do it, because they have Devin Singletary, who's collecting still guaranteed money. But Cam Scatterbo and Tyrone Tracy, the future of those two as a 1-2 punch, oh, baby, I love it. I absolutely love it. I think they're going to be a dynamite duo moving forward. All right. Round 5, Marcus Bowe, offensive lineman. Marcus Bowe is an interesting pick. Okay, he played most of his college career at right tackle. or the last 2 years, I think, at right tackle because of injuries to guys on his team. He also has experience at right guard. Brian Dable said after the draft was over that they're going to work Marcus Bowe at tackle. Now, remember, they also have, for backup depth, they have Stone Forsythe, James Hudson III. Okay. So now Marcus Bowe is going to join that group. Marcus Bowe, by the way, that means now that Evan Neal, whose fifth-year option was not picked up, it's guard or bust for Evan Neal. And I have questions about Evan Neal, but that's for another show. Marcus Bowe, what do I like about him? Good length. All right. He's a little light, so he probably needs to add a little bit more bulk. Needs to get a little bit stronger. His play strength, was good enough for college, but needs to, kind of pick up a little bit for the pros. But this guy is athletic. He's a good run blocker. He can get out to the second level, all right, very quickly. And he's a people mover, all right. He just needs to, again, build up the strength so that it's NFL quality. And I think the Giants are really going to have something there with him to where now, remember, Jermaine Illuminor is in the final year of his contract. He may not be here next year. Greg Van Roten has only been signed to 1 year. All right. He might not be back next year. Evan Neal, as I mentioned, final year of his rookie deal. They didn't pick up his option. If he doesn't make the conversion to guard, he won't be back. If he even, sticks on the team. They have Jake Kubas, who they're cross-training for guard and center. I think he should probably be here because, you need more than one offensive lineman or interior offensive lineman. Austin Schlottman, I believe, is in the final year of his deal. So you have the potential for turnover at that interior line spot. And, Marcus Bowe, get him ready. All right. He's going to probably sit and get some development. Could he potentially be like a tight end, a jumbo tight end? Possibly. But no rush to get that kid into the lineup right now. Just let him get better. Let him get, his technique underneath him and see where it takes you later in the year or, even next year. But I like that pick because the Giants needed some interior offensive line depth. And Marcus Bowe can give them guard snaps or snaps at tackle. So we'll just have to see how that all plays out, how he does at the pro level. But the plan, like I said, according to Brian Dable, Marcus Bowe is going to get some snaps at tackle. All right. There was no 6th-round pick, but there were 2 7th-round picks. The Giants dipping into, again, a deep class with their first 7th-round pick when they took tight end Thomas Fidone II. Okay. Thomas Fidone, think in terms of a Chris Manhertz for Thomas Fidone. Good blocker. He hasn't played a whole lot because he had some injury issues during his time in school, but he's a good blocker. Not a bad receiver. I mean, his hands are pretty good, but he's not a guy who's going to pick up a ton of yardage after the catch. I think his role eventually is going to be on special teams and maybe as a blocker. I don't see him maybe being, a frequent pass catcher. He might get a ball thrown to him here and there, but, Theo Johnson's going to be the primary catcher. Now, Fidone joins a tight ends group. You have Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, who's in the final year of his deal, Greg Dulcich in the final year of his deal, Chris Manhertz signed through this year. So again, potential for turnover after this season. Somebody won't stick around after summer. Okay, somebody will either get moved or get cut. And by bringing in Fidone, they have a guy who now, they can develop. They need to work on, getting his pad level consistent, improving his strength, which you're going to hear me say a lot with these rookies coming in. And just, getting him up to speed as a run blocker because that's where they're going to need him. Pass pro, not bad as at pass pro, but a little better on the run blocking end. So there's some work to be done there with Fidone. Does he make the roster? If he does, maybe his role will be special teams initially, or he might end up on the practice squad, depending on how the competition plays out, because I don't see the Giants keeping more than 3 tight ends on the 53-man roster. All right, the final pick was cornerback Corey Black. Now, Corey Black, interesting prospect here from Oklahoma State. Corey Black can play special teams, so I have to think that appealed to the Giants. But you look at the cornerback situation in the Giants room, again, pretty stacked, you would say. Deontay Banks obviously is going to start. You've got Paulson Adebo, who they signed in the offseason. He's going to be your other starter. You still have Cordell Flott, who is in the final year of his deal. You've got Trey Hawkins coming back from that back injury that he suffered. So you've got guys in front of him. But the thing about Corey Black to kind of take away is he's pretty good in zone coverage. And the selection of Corey Black says to me that maybe the Giants want to stay with that zone coverage scheme moving forward. Now, what that's going to mean for Deontay Banks, who struggled in zone last year, that remains to be seen. Can Marquand Manuel, the new defensive backs coach, can he get more out of Deontay Banks in terms of playing zone coverage? We need to see how that plays out a little bit. But Corey Black right now, I think he's going to be, if he makes the 53-man roster, special teams. That's going to be his calling card for the time being. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in playing special teams, especially, the lower down the draft pick. So overall, folks, a really impressive Giants draft class. I like this class on paper. And I realize, on paper, it means nothing. What do they do on the field? Do they look, do they live up to it? How many of these guys are actually going to be starters or contributors? It all remains to be seen. And the first part obviously starts with rookie minicamp, when we get to see them, in the drills and, going through some 7-on-7 and stuff like that. So I'll be sure to take some good notes for you, share my observations. And of course, we'll also see some of the undrafted free agents. Those signings are going on now as I'm, recording this, but I'll get all caught up on that later on the week, maybe talk about that with you guys. But we have so much more coming up here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So do keep it here, and I will keep you updated as I find out who's coming on the show to talk about these newcomers to the New York Giants. So Giant fans, hope you had a great draft weekend. Thank you, as always, for tuning into the Locked On Giants podcast. I do appreciate you spending time with me. That's going to do it, and I will see you guys again on Monday with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants.